The sky that morning looked like someone had dragged a wet paintbrush across a sheet of gray paper. It didn't rain, but it felt like it might at any second, like the sky itself was holding back tears. People were already gathered when I arrived, their whispers slicing through the quiet like dull knives. My heels sank slightly into the soft earth as I approached the gravesite, each step feeling heavier than the last. I noticed the way my in-laws glanced at me, then quickly looked away, as if my presence was somehow wrong. The pastor stood at the head of the casket, speaking his name, Elliot Lane Morgan, as if it were a final punctuation. But when he said it, it felt like a stranger's. I looked at the casket, closed, sealed tight. I hadn't asked to open it. I hadn't demanded to see the body, because the truth is, I never saw it, never saw him. And that small, burning fact lodged itself in the back of my mind, even as I stood among people pretending to grieve. When the service ended, before I could even gather my thoughts, Opaline, Elliot's mother, walked up to me with her spine straight and lips pinched like she'd just tasted vinegar. "You have 5 days to get out," she said. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. I blinked. "Get out of where?" She tilted her head slightly, almost amused. "Out of the house. It's ours now." My stomach dropped. I looked around, expecting someone to object, to tell her she was out of line, but nobody spoke. Not her other children, not her husband, not even Elliot's brother, who had been the one to call me 2 weeks ago with the news. No one. Just silence and eyes that wouldn't meet mine. I asked, "Are you serious?" She didn't even answer. She turned and walked away like it was settled, and maybe, in their eyes, it was. I drove home in a fog, trying to remember the last time I'd seen Elliot. It was 2 weeks ago. He kissed me on the cheek and told me he was heading out for a conference in Atlanta. "Only a couple nights," he'd said, tossing a bag into the back seat of his car. He looked distracted, nervous even, but I didn't press him. I'd gotten used to the distance. Our last conversation was about groceries. I asked if he wanted anything picked up while he was gone. He said, "Just don't forget the peanut butter," and smiled. A few days later, his brother called. "He's gone," he said. "Gone. No accident details. No hospital. No police report. Just gone. They said he collapsed, something about a heart condition. But I wasn't given a death certificate. No one asked me to identify the body. I was told not to come to the hospital, that it was already handled. That day, something tugged at me. A whisper in my gut said, "Something's not right." Back home after the funeral, I stepped through the door and froze. Boxes. All my things were boxed up, neatly stacked in the hallway. Carly, Elliot's sister, was standing nearby holding a clipboard. "We thought we'd help you start the moving process," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What is this?" I asked. "Just trying to make things easier. You've been through a lot." I walked to the living room. Half the furniture was missing, picture frames taken off the wall, my jewelry box emptied, the wedding photo that always sat on the fireplace mantel. Gone. I turned to her. "Where is everything?" She shrugged. "I don't know what you mean." "You went through my things?" Carly didn't blink. "You're overreacting. It's just stuff." I clenched my jaw. "This is my home." "Not anymore," she said, and turned away. I stood in that gutted room, fists clenched, breathing shallow. But I wasn't grieving. I was waking up. That night, after the house finally went quiet, I plugged in my phone. I hadn't looked at it all day. It lit up with a single notification, a message, from Elliot's number. "You need to leave before they hurt you." I didn't die. I stared at the screen, my fingers numb. My first thought, someone hacked his account. A cruel prank. But I knew that number, every digit of it. I tapped call. It rang, once, then silence. That same cold pressure that had been hovering around me for days finally pushed its way in. I sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the wall, every part of me vibrating with confusion and dread. Everything started clicking in the most horrifying way. The closed casket, the rushed funeral, the the way they'd practically shoved me out of my own home, the missing belongings. I whispered to myself, barely able to hear my own voice. Why would he fake his death, unless he didn't? The message stayed on my screen long after my fingers stopped shaking. You need to leave before they hurt you. I didn't die. I read it again, out loud this time, like hearing it might make it more real. But all it did was make my stomach turn. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, a wrong number, a cruel joke. The first face that came to mind was Carly. It was exactly her kind of twisted. I tried calling the number, but it rang once and then cut off. No voicemail, no trace. I opened a search page, trying to look up the number. It came up as unlisted, private, unreachable. I dropped the phone on the couch and sat in the dark. Every muscle in my body tensed like I was waiting for something to jump out from the shadows. For a moment, I wondered if I was losing it. Grief does strange things to people. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I dreamed it. But no, there it was, still glowing on my screen. I forwarded the message to my email, just in case. My hands were cold, but my mind was racing. If Elliot wasn't dead, then someone had gone to great lengths to make sure I thought he was. Later that night, I went into my bedroom. It didn't feel like mine anymore. Half the closet was empty, the sheets smelled like stale linen and dust. I walked over to the dresser and opened the bottom drawer. He always kept it locked, but I remembered the little brass key he once gave me, just in case. I'd tossed it into a jewelry box months ago. It clicked open. At first, I didn't see anything unusual. No wallet, no passport, but I remembered seeing his passport there just a month ago, when we were booking flights. Gone. So were the credit card statements, his medical forms. Every scrap of paper that could have told me where he was, where he'd been, had vanished. Except one thing, a photograph. It was face down, shoved to the back like someone had forgotten it. I pulled it out. It was the two of us on the pier in Savannah. Smiling, I had my arm around his waist, but what made my blood run cold was the thick circle of ink around his eyes, drawn deliberately, not scribbled by accident. Was he planning this back then? Was that the beginning? The next morning, I found Opaline in the kitchen. She was slicing an apple of all things. Calm, methodical, like nothing had happened. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Did you plan to sell the house the moment he died? She didn't look up. The moment he left, we were free. Left, not died. I don't think he's dead. Her hand paused for just a second, just a flicker. Then she gave a small laugh, wiped the knife clean on a dish towel. That's grief talking, Ray. No, I said quietly. That's instinct. Her eyes met mine, hard as stone. Be careful what you dig up. Sometimes it's better to leave the dead buried. That told me everything. That evening, I sat in the living room. I hadn't unpacked the boxes they stuffed my things in. I didn't feel safe enough to. Every noise outside made me twitch. Around 9, I went to check the front yard. My car sat on the curb, slumped on its rims. All 4 tires, slashed. I called the police. They showed up 40 minutes later, barely looked interested. Said it was probably some teenager fooling around. I knew better. That wasn't random. That was a message. At the grocery store the next morning, I tried to buy milk. My debit card got declined. Tried another one. Same thing. I checked the banking app. The joint account had been frozen. I hadn't touched it since he died. They were cutting me off, slowly, quietly. The people in town I'd known for years suddenly avoided me. The lady at the post office. The guy who fixed our fence last summer. People acted like I had a disease. They weren't just trying to erase Elliot. They were trying to erase me. Around sunset, I was sitting on the porch, phone in hand, when Mason pulled up in his old truck. He didn't say anything at first, just handed me a folded napkin before driving off. Meet me at the pier after dark. Come alone. The pier wasn't far. I waited until after 10, dressed in all black, like that would somehow protect me. I didn't turn on the flashlight, just walked, heart thudding in my chest like a drum. Mason was already there, sitting on the edge of the dock. When he saw me, he stood quickly, eyes darting like he expected someone to jump out of the trees. "I saw him," he whispered. "Elliot?" He nodded. "2 days ago, at the motel off 17. He looked right at me. Then he ducked out of sight." "Why didn't you tell anyone?" "Because they paid a guy to fake the paperwork. Death certificate, everything. Opaline wrote the check." I blinked. "Why would they do that?" He looked down. "Because you weren't supposed to see something you saw." I stepped back. "What do you mean?" "I don't know exactly, but whatever it was, it scared him." And it scared them worse. Mason grabbed my arm, panic in his voice. "If you stay here, they'll make sure you disappear too." The drive home was short, but the sky hung low and heavy like it knew something I didn't. Rain tapped the windshield in lazy rhythms, almost like a warning in Morse code. By the time I turned onto my street, twilight had swallowed the last light of day. I slowed the car as I approached the house. The porch light flickered, again, but what froze me was the front door. It wasn't wide open, just slightly ajar, like someone had forgotten to pull it shut all the way, but I knew I'd locked it. I always locked it. I stepped out, heart hammering, keys gripped like a weapon. Inside, everything looked untouched, too untouched, like a staged play, not a lived-in home. I crept through the living room, checked the kitchen, the study, nothing missing, nothing broken. Until I saw the small, red, blinking light on the camera control panel near the back door. The one Elliot had installed, just in case. I walked over, leaned in. Red usually meant trouble, or tampering. I tapped the screen. It stuttered, froze, then skipped entire hours. Why would someone mess with camera angles, unless they wanted to rewrite what had been seen? By the time I backed out of the driveway again, it was full dark. My tires hissed on wet pavement as I headed for the funeral home. Leora was still inside, probably doing paperwork. She looked startled when I burst in, rain-soaked and angry. "I need the original footage from Elliot's funeral," I said, before she could speak. She adjusted her glasses. "That's not something I can just hand over." "I'm family," I snapped. "His wife?" Or did everyone forget that the moment the casket closed? She hesitated, her hands folded on the desk too carefully. The files were archived off-site. I leaned over the desk. "Then give me the login. I'm not leaving until I see them." Leora exhaled. I did notice something strange. She led me down the narrow hall to a small office. The computer hummed low, the only sound in the room. "I tried reviewing the footage 2 days ago, just for closure." Her voice dropped. "Minutes are missing. It jumps." I sat down, pulled the files up. The timestamp rolled smoothly until 2:03 p.m. Then, a hard cut. The next frame said 2:17. 14 minutes gone. I rewound, looked again. The lighting in the funeral room didn't match the new timestamp. Shadows in the wrong direction. The sun was supposed to be gone by then. I checked the metadata. Someone had overwritten the original file. Same file name, new modified date, deliberate, clean, too clean. I took screenshots, downloaded logs, even snapped a photo of Leora's screen on my phone. She didn't stop me. "I don't want trouble," she whispered. I stood. "Then don't lie for them." The parking lot was empty when I stepped out, the kind of dark that swallows sound. I walked to my car, fumbling for keys, then felt it, someone watching. I turned sharply. A black sedan was parked across the lot, lights off, engine silent. As I stared, it pulled away slowly, tires crunching the wet gravel, then vanished around the corner. Something white fluttered on my windshield. I grabbed it, a single piece of paper. Bold letters typed across the top. "Stop digging, or you'll disappear too." The letterhead, DMV. The same paper they used when Elliot renewed his registration. They were in the system. They were everywhere. I clutched the note. Fear clawed at my throat, but underneath it was something harder, clearer. If they're threatening me, that means I'm close. I drove home without the radio on. I didn't need noise. My mind was loud enough. Back inside, I spread the screenshots, notes, logs across the kitchen table. The red blinking light on the camera panel hadn't stopped. I opened my laptop, attached everything to a new email. Subject line, urgent. Recipient, Theron, the lawyer. Elliot never trusted, but I always did. I hit send. Then I opened my diary. The leather one I kept hidden under the floorboard, the one Elliot never knew existed. I am not asking for safety, I wrote. I am demanding the truth. Tomorrow, the family was gathering again, another staged performance, another layer of lies. And this time, I'd be ready. I wouldn't whisper. I'd speak. Loudly. I closed the book, but my pulse didn't settle. Not even close. Tomorrow, I reveal what they tried to bury. Will they let me? When the invitation came in the mail that afternoon, my hands trembled before I recognized Opaline's elegant script. Please attend a private family dinner in Marcus's honor. It was polite. It was formal. But every word carried a threat. I wanted to say no. Walk away. Let them stew in their lies. But this was my chance to face them all. To confront every shadow hiding behind polite smiles. I prepared carefully. I clipped screenshots of the camera log, the metadata, the screenshots showing the red blinking panel, and the DMV letter threat note. I placed them in a slim folder under my jacket. Today, I wouldn't look like a victim. I chose a dark navy dress, classic, conservative, but strong. No frills, no weakness. I pulled on my coat, slipped the folder in, and walked out. The drive felt like marching into a battle. Charleston's oak-lined streets glowed golden in the late afternoon sun. I kept replaying his voice in my head. My family never fights fair. They smile when they stab. Every breath braced me. The wind whispered through the open shoulders of my coat, like an omen carrying a warning I couldn't fully hear. At the Grand family home, they greeted me as I stepped from the car. Smiles stretched across their faces, small talk and handshakes as if none of it had happened. I kept my expression steady. I nodded. Thank you for inviting me. Their eyes flickered, but no one mentioned eviction, the funeral, or missing belongings. Marceline raised a glass shortly after I sat. Her smile was glossy. To strong women who survive anything, she toasted. The words felt sharp, like a knife she meant to twist. I looked at the head table. My place was at the end, far from the spotlight. It was symbolic. Exclusion in plain sight. Everyone else sat closer to her, aligned as a front. I studied each face, who avoided my eyes, who forced a polite glance. They were hoping I'd break or storm out. Not today. Dinner began. The chatter was light, stiff, then Opaline took over. She told a version of the funeral that warped truth. Ray demanded an exhumation. She created a scene with the staff, she said. She claimed I yelled, disrupted, humiliated the family. I held my breath, heart thudding. When I spoke, my voice even. Did anyone here actually see Marcus's body? Silence. A murmur from one cousin. I think I did. I saw a casket. No one else backed it up. I stood and pulled a flash drive from inside my jacket. I plugged it into a small monitor they'd set up for slide photos. The clip played, the timestamp jumped. The lighting didn't match. I offered the DMV note. Which one of you has friends there? I asked. Opaline dismissed it as counterfeit, but I caught the quick glance she sent to her brother. I told them, if none of you have anything to hide, why do you act like I'm the enemy? An aunt whispered, because you're not one of us anymore. They all stared. The silence stretched like a held breath. My heart pounded. I dropped copies of the footage all across the table. This isn't just about Marcus. This is about power. I announced I'd hired legal counsel, filed a report with the state attorney. Marceline slammed her glass. You don't know what you're playing with, she hissed. My eyes stayed locked on hers. Then let's find out. That's when I looked toward the end of the room. Mason, he wasn't there. Theron's email came just after sunrise. I hadn't slept, just sat at the kitchen table watching the coffee pot cycle through its last breath of steam. I reviewed your files, he wrote. The data integrity is strong. I'm filing a motion first thing this morning. Relief came first. then fear. If he could see the truth that clearly, so could they. I called him right away. His voice was calm, but low, deliberate. "Ray, once this goes public, they'll try to bury us. Be careful who you trust." I sent everything through his secure portal, screenshots, metadata, the DMV threat note. "I don't care how dirty they play," I told him. "I'll match them move for move." An hour later, I was in his office. Theron's firm was small, tucked between a pawn shop and a dentist on Broad Street, but inside, it felt like the nerve center of a war room. 3 monitors glowed with lines of code, file paths, and legal documents. He pointed to one screen. "This is your chain of custody," he said. "Every edit, every overwrite. See these file hashes? They don't match the originals. Whoever did this used admin access from inside the funeral system." I leaned closer. The names of 2 IP addresses flashed across the screen, one tied to the funeral home's network, the other traced to a private address in Opaline's neighborhood. My stomach twisted. "So they knew how to alter it?" "They knew when," he corrected. "Right after you confronted them." He walked me through the evidence, the time gaps, the overwritten logs, even the false metadata tags pretending to be backups. It wasn't just tampering, it was orchestrated, precise. "This isn't a family dispute," he said quietly. "This is a setup." I felt my pulse quicken, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was focus. "Then file the injunction. Freeze the trust accounts. Make them explain the missing funds." He nodded. "We'll need to move fast." By noon, we drafted a demand letter addressed directly to Marceline and the board controlling the family trust. It listed the evidence, point by point, tampering, false declarations, possible fraud. "I want it made public," I said. Theron looked at me like I'd grown another head. "That's not how this works. You let the courts handle it." "They've been handling it behind closed doors for years," I shot back. "Public pressure is the only thing they can't control." He hesitated, then sighed. "All right, but once it's out, there's no taking it back." Within an hour, the letter was published on a legal news site. Headline: Charleston widow challenges family trust over alleged death fraud. By nightfall, the blowback hit. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Bank alerts, notifications, messages. First, my savings account, frozen. Then my credit line, revoked. The mortgage autopay flagged invalid. Theron called again. They moved fast. Faster than I expected. Then came the headlines. Disgraced widow accuses in-laws of faking husband's death. Marceline issued a public statement calling me unstable and desperate for sympathy. Every talk show in town picked it up. The same people who'd once pitied me now whispered like I'd lost my mind. I sat in the living room, phone face down on the table, the air heavy and still. I'd expected the fight. I hadn't expected how lonely it would feel when the world turned. "This is why I had to do it this way," I whispered to the quiet. Sometime after midnight, I heard a soft thud on the porch. When I opened the door, no one was there. Just a plain envelope, no return address. Inside, a flash drive, a single note. "You'll need this. M." I plugged it into my laptop. The files loaded slowly, one after another. Raw video footage, no gaps, no edits. The original camera feed from the funeral home. And there he was, Elliot, alive. Walking out the side door just minutes after the service began, my hands went numb. The footage was real. This was the proof no one could bury. I fought smart, I said to myself. Now I fight to finish. Then, 3 soft clicks at the front door. Metal sliding. Someone testing the lock. It was 3 in the morning, and whoever was outside wasn't knocking. I arrived at the family estate just before sunset, parking my car in the long circular drive. The sky was bruised purple, shadows creeping across the lawn. Media vans flanked the front gate. Cameras, reporters, all waiting. This wasn't a funeral anymore. It was a spectacle. I walked forward, no greeting, no hesitation. I was ready. Standing before the crowd, I held the folder of evidence in my hand. My voice was steady. I will no longer hide. I demand the truth. I handed out copies of the footage, the metadata, the DMV note. Marceline's smile slipped. The cousins murmured among themselves. I quoted a legal precedent. Under U.S. law, a widow has the right to contest contested death claims and demand forensic review. I told them, this isn't just about me, this is about justice. The power shifted. I wasn't reacting, I was directing. Then I revealed the last check. I walked to the table, slid the check forward. I read it aloud. This is the final check you'll ever cash in my name. Gasps rippled through the room. Some faces went pale. Marceline recoiled. She opened her mouth, but nothing came. I held firm. I told them I'd rather walk away from the house than live among lies. From the corner, I saw Elowen blinking back tears. The doors of the room burst open. Calloway stood in the doorway. His look was gaunt, hollow eyes under shadowed brow. Flashes went off. The crowd gasped. My heart slammed. You're alive, I thought. He stepped forward. I never left you. I was trapped, he said, voice cracked. The room exploded. Shock, anger, confusion. Mothers gasped. Brothers blinked. Cousins whispered. Marceline rushed to her son, wrapping him in arms she hadn't offered me. How dare you betray us? She screamed. I faced Calloway. Why didn't you tell me? What deal did you make? He stammered. She'd threatened harm. Secret blackmail. He'd acted under duress. I saw Marceline's face flicker, her facade cracking. I said quietly, if you loved me, you would have told me. He looked away, guilt in his eyes. Later that night, I returned home with Calloway at my side. The streets were empty, the air thick. He and I planned, media expose, motion filing, exposing Marceline's lies. But as I unlocked the front door, a shadow passed across the window. Someone rattled the doorknob. I froze. The hinge creaked. Footsteps approached. I held my breath and crept to the window. Someone was watching me again. The sound was faint at first, a slow scrape, the metal turn of a doorknob. My breath caught. I grabbed the kitchen knife from the counter and the phone with trembling fingers. The clock read 2:46 a.m. I whispered into the receiver, leaving a message for Theron. Someone's here. The floorboards creaked under my bare feet as I moved toward the hallway. When I flipped the switch, the light flickered, throwing long shadows across the room. No one, just a shattered window and muddy footprints leading toward the back porch. I followed them, the knife tight in my hand, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I turned toward the security monitor. The red light blinked. Someone had tampered with it again. I hit play on the last saved clip and froze. A hooded figure walked across the yard, pausing right by my camera. The face turned just enough for me to see. Calloway, the man I'd buried. The man who swore he was protecting me. I locked every door, reset the system, then called the police. My voice sounded strange to me, flat, calm, distant. Yes, I know who it was, I said. And no, I'm not mistaken. By morning, I was sitting in a cold chair at the station, fluorescent lights humming above. A detective played back surveillance footage from a nearby gas station. Calloway again, alive, meeting with Marceline. 2 nights ago. They stood near a dark sedan. Another man joined them, wearing a sheriff's jacket. He handed Marceline a folder, thick and unmarked. The detective paused the tape. You're stirring up things best left alone, Mrs. Calloway. I stared straight ahead. Then I guess I'll keep digging until I hit the bottom. I left the station with the air burning cold against my face. By midday, I was driving down a dirt road that led to a forgotten property once owned by Marcus's father. The trees hung low, and the mailbox at the gate was stuffed with receipts, dated last week. Someone had been here. Inside the house, the air was too clean. No dust, no cobwebs, a half-empty water bottle on the table, a coffee mug in the sink. This wasn't abandoned. It was a hideout. I walked through the narrow hall, my pulse steady now, not from fear but focus. In the bedroom, under a warped floorboard, I found a leather-bound notebook. His handwriting. Calloway's. Each page was dated, organized, cold. Transactions. Meetings. Payouts. A name beside each one, mine included. And one line written deeper, pressed into the paper like he'd carved it with guilt. Ray will never believe I loved her anyway. I sat there for a long time, the notebook open in my lap, feeling the ground shift beneath everything I thought I knew. He hadn't been trapped. He'd been part of it. When I got home, the house was dark, but he was there, standing in the living room like a ghost caught between guilt and cowardice. His eyes hollow, his clothes damp from the rain. "Ray," he started. "Please listen. I didn't want this." "You buried me with your lies," I said, stepping closer. "You faked your death, and you let them ruin me." He looked broken, voice cracking. "I thought if I played along, they'd leave you out. They said if I didn't, they'd kill you. I thought I was protecting you." I didn't think. I just struck him. The sound of my hand against his face cut the air clean. "You destroyed me to save yourself," I said. "Don't you dare call that love." He stood there shaking, eyes glassy. "I'll fix it. I'll testify. I'll tell them everything." I looked at him, cold and steady. "You'll testify because if you don't, I'll make sure you never see daylight again." He nodded, defeated. There was no fire left in him, no man I'd once trusted, just a shadow trying to rewrite his sins. An hour later, my laptop pinged. An encrypted email from Theron. No message, just an attachment. I downloaded it, hesitating before pressing play. At first, just static. Then voices, clear, familiar. Marceline. She's starting to connect the dots. Then another voice, steady, controlled. Elowen. Good, she said. The more she struggles, the easier it is to make her disappear. You'll have what you need once she breaks publicly. I froze. The realization hit like a physical blow. Elowen wasn't the victim I thought she was. She wasn't manipulated. She was orchestrating everything. Using them both. Using me. I replayed the file 3 times, every syllable sinking like a blade. Then I whispered to no one in particular. She played all of us. And as the night deepened around me, one thought burned clear. I still had one chapter left to write. The kitchen table was covered in notes, highlighters, and copies of bank statements. I sat across from Theron, reading the same sentence over and over. My voice cracked halfway through, but I pushed on. And that's when I knew the money wasn't just missing, it was weaponized. He didn't interrupt, just nodded, handed me a glass of water, and waited until I found my breath again. The past few months had aged me in ways no mirror could reflect. Some things don't come back, like trust or time. But I was still here, and Elowen's name, finally, was on every channel. A letter came that morning. Calloway's handwriting, neat, too neat. I tore it open, read it once, then twice. No apology, just the kind of regret cowards write when they're cornered. I held the paper to the flame of the stove, watched it blacken, curl, and vanish. "You were the chapter I should have closed years ago," I whispered. Just then, my son came bouncing down the hallway, holding up a crayon drawing. "Mom wins," it said in wobbly blue letters. A stick figure version of me stood smiling, arms raised like a champion. I held that scrap of paper longer than anything I'd held in weeks. The courthouse was packed. People I didn't know whispered my name like it belonged to a movie. Reporters clustered near the doors. Theron led the way, clearing a path through the noise. I walked in steady, not brave, not angry, just ready. Elowen sat already at the defendant's table. Her expression gave nothing away. But when the judge denied her bail, the flicker in her eyes was real. A tight swallow, a flick of her wrist, small cracks in the porcelain. One by one, testimonies rolled out. The detective, 2 forensic accountants, then me. I didn't look at the jury. I looked at her. Elowen. I trusted her. I grieved with her. I believed she was my family. My voice didn't shake. Not once. She wasn't grieving. She was calculating. Then the door opened again. A woman in a soft gray coat stepped forward. My old neighbor. I hadn't seen her in years. "I was paid to lie," she said flatly. "I didn't know the full extent, but I took the money." The courtroom shifted. A collective inhale. Elowen didn't flinch, but she wouldn't meet my eyes anymore. The judge adjourned for sentencing. I walked out into the daylight, exhaling a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying in my chest for so long. The next morning, I met Marceline at a cafe that smelled like burnt toast and old stories. She looked tired, older than last week. The lines on her face no longer seemed sharp, just worn. "I thought she loved me too," she said quietly, staring into her coffee. "We were both used," I replied. "Collateral in her war." We sat for a while, not friends, not enemies, just two women tired of pretending we were anything but broken in different ways. She agreed to help return what could be saved: therapy, financial restitution. The right kind of beginning. As we stood to leave, I said, "Healing isn't about staying, it's choosing not to return." Back home, I opened the windows, let light touch corners that hadn't seen it in months. I changed the photos on the wall, new faces, new laughter. I replaced the rug that used to hold Marcus's coffee stains, put fresh flowers on the table. Theron showed up with a bottle of wine and a smile I hadn't seen in years. "You saved yourself," he said, pulling me into a hug. "That's the bravest thing I've seen." I didn't argue. The next day, I reopened my little art studio downtown, Phoenix Co. A new name for a life rebuilt from fire, and for the first time in a long time, my laughter didn't sound like a stranger's. That weekend, I went to the backyard and stood under the old tree Marcus used to sit by. In my hands was a box. Inside, wedding photos, Elowen's letters, Calloway's tie. I buried it deep. No ceremony, no tears. Just a note I'd written and folded inside. "I forgive you. I free myself." Later that evening, the TV buzzed with breaking news. 2 more arrests tied to Elowen's web. I didn't stay to watch. I turned off the screen. Some endings are quiet, but they echo forever. The kitchen table was covered in notes, highlighters, and copies of bank statements. I sat across from Theron, reading the same sentence over and over. My voice cracked halfway through, but I pushed on. And that's when I knew the money wasn't just missing, it was weaponized. He didn't interrupt, just nodded, handed me a glass of water, and waited until I found my breath again. The past few months had aged me in ways no mirror could reflect. Some things don't come back, like trust or time. But I was still here, and Elowen's name, finally, was on every channel. A letter came that morning. Calloway's handwriting. Neat. Too neat. I tore it open, read it once, then twice. No apology. Just the kind of regret cowards write when they're cornered. I held the paper to the flame of the stove, watched it blacken, curl, and vanish. "You were the chapter I should have closed years ago," I whispered. Just then, my son came bouncing down the hallway, holding up a crayon drawing. "Mom wins," it said in wobbly blue letters. A stick figure version of me stood smiling, arms raised like a champion. I held that scrap of paper longer than anything I'd held in weeks. The courthouse was packed. People I didn't know whispered my name like it belonged to a movie. Reporters clustered near the doors. Theron led the way, clearing a path through the noise. I walked in steady, not brave, not angry, just ready. Elowen sat already at the defendant's table. Her expression gave nothing away. But when the judge denied her bail, the flicker in her eyes was real. A tight swallow, a flick of her wrist, small cracks in the porcelain. One by one, testimonies rolled out. The detective, 2 forensic accountants, then me. I didn't look at the jury. I looked at her. Elowen. I trusted her. I grieved with her. I believed she was my family. My voice didn't shake. Not once. She wasn't grieving. She was calculating. Then the door opened again. A woman in a soft gray coat stepped forward. My old neighbor. I hadn't seen her in years. "I was paid to lie," she said flatly. "I didn't know the full extent, but I took the money." The courtroom shifted. A collective inhale. Elowen didn't flinch, but she wouldn't meet my eyes anymore. The judge adjourned for sentencing. I walked out into the daylight, exhaling a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying in my chest for so long. The next morning, I met Marceline at a cafe that smelled like burnt toast and old stories. She looked tired, older than last week. The lines on her face no longer seemed sharp, just worn. "I thought she loved me too," she said quietly, staring into her coffee. "We were both used," I replied, "collateral in her war." We sat for a while, not friends, not enemies, just two women tired of pretending we were anything but broken in different ways. She agreed to help return what could be saved. Therapy. Financial restitution. The right kind of beginning. As we stood to leave, I said, "Healing isn't about staying, it's choosing not to return." Back home, I opened the windows, let light touch corners that hadn't seen it in months. I changed the photos on the wall. New faces, new laughter. I replaced the rug that used to hold Marcus's coffee stains, put fresh flowers on the table. Theron showed up with a bottle of wine and a smile I hadn't seen in years. "You saved yourself," he said, pulling me into a hug. "That's the bravest thing I've seen." I didn't argue. The next day, I reopened my little art studio downtown, Phoenix Co., a new name for a life rebuilt from fire. And for the first time in a long time, my laughter didn't sound like a stranger's. That weekend, I went to the backyard and stood under the old tree Marcus used to sit by. In my hands was a box. Inside, wedding photos, Elowen's letters, Calloway's tie. I buried it deep. No ceremony, no tears. Just a note I'd written and folded inside. "I forgive you. I free myself." Later that evening, the TV buzzed with breaking news. 2 more arrests tied to Elowen's web. I didn't stay to watch. I turned off the screen. Some endings are quiet, but they echo forever.